should give that job to Norman.
Norman, share amongst pages, please.
What is Norman attached to?
I don't know.
Okay, so let's start chatting. Hi, Maria. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
How are you? Okay, so the title of the live feed today is Champaign, Cigars, Nukes, and the Left. Very interesting title. And so we need to start, first of all, with a little bit of an update to last week. As you know, last Saturday, a video of a Christian preacher in London, in Southgate, was arrested, that went viral, reaching millions and millions of people with press all across the world. And so we're doing a little update tonight, first of all, about what's happened since then. And the story is basically that this man, Olu, who is Nigerian, lives in the area, is constantly on the streets preaching. After his arrest, he was dropped miles away from where he was arrested, all the way near Hadley Woods. And Hadley Woods is about 5-6 miles away from Southgate in North London. He had handcuffs on his wrists, and his Bible was taken away from him and thrown in the back of the police car. Well, he's done an updated video for Christian Concern. Christian Concern are the organization that we contacted after the incident. They've been extremely good in finding and tracking down the preacher, tracking down him, bringing him into the offices, doing a wonderful video for Olu. And he's been speaking about his experience and how it's not going to stop him from his work, from his faith work. But there is a video that was before the arrest, and I've done a little video with Christian Concern about my experiences of what I saw. So that video will be released soon. And Christian Concern, I think, Sharon, if you want to talk about that while I find the petition, they've ran a petition. Do you want to, have you got the petition there?
Okay, I'm going to be looking for it. I haven't got it here, but I'll post it for you.
It's a letter to Sajid Javid.
I'm just looking it up for you. Christian Concern is an organization that takes on issues that relate to Christians when they have issues with police or being blocked from practicing their religion. For instance, the lady who was taken to court or lost her job at British Airways because she wore a cross. Well, Christian Concern with the people who helped her to fight for her rights, her freedom, to express her Christian religion in a way that is not overt, but in a way that is meaningful to her, and in a way that we've accepted in the West for a very long time, that people are allowed to have the freedom of religious expression. So you find people wearing crosses, they're wearing St. Christopher's, they wear Magen David's, they walk around with prayer beads. People are allowed to do that. But from time to time, we find that there are certain people who object to Christians expressing their Christianity. And this is what Christian Concern do. They're an organization that came together. They're a group of lawyers. They're a group of activists. And so this is what they do. And now what has happened is they were alerted to this, the plight of this preacher who was very unceremoniously hauled off the streets of London in handcuffs as the police requisitioned his Bible from him, with him begging, "Don't take my Bible," and them saying, "You should have thought of that before you became racist." Now, this is not what we expect of our police, particularly in London, where we have a knife crime a night, maybe two knife crimes a night, where two Jews have been kicked in the head in Holloway and Islington by gangs, where all sorts of things, there are people being killed. I think today or yesterday, somebody was killed. And so here we've got two policemen bothering with the man who's preaching about his religion on the streets of London. And then they drop him in somewhere near Hadley Wood without a penny in his pocket.
Yeah,
And he has to find his way back.
There's an area, Sharon, if you know North London and High Barnet, which goes from High Barnet, which the police said that they didn't do this, but they basically drove another 3 or 4 miles out to the outskirts of London, which is on the outskirts. Barnet is in Hertfordshire, and dropped him there. And a good Samaritan gave him some money to get a bus back. He had no money on him. So the petition, have you found the? I've got the petition
here.
Yeah,
I found the petition.
Okay.
I'm just going to post it. Do you want to read it and I'll post it?
Okay. So the petition is basically to the Home Secretary Sajid Javid, and it's important that you sign this petition, whether you are a Christian, a Jew, or not. This is about freedom of speech. This is not about prophesizing or missionizing you as an individual to any religion, to Christianity, or whatever you are. This has to be picked up and understood by the Jewish community, that when somebody wants to freely express their religion on the streets of London, in the streets of the UK, as has been done for hundreds of years, then a man is protected with his freedom of rights. So the petition is basically saying that this is not the first time that Christian street preachers have been arrested. The Christian Legal Centre have helped many preachers who have been arrested, in some cases facing criminal charges. We're looking at a list of people here. So the petition writes a letter to Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, and a video of the preacher Olu being arrested outside Southgate police station was seen by millions of people. It writes to the letter to him saying that the law protects freedom of speech, even if it offends, shocks, or disturbs others. But too often, police officers have shown themselves either to be ignorant of this freedom or unwilling to uphold it. And this leads to a chilling effect, where people are increasingly unwilling to say what they believe for fear of arrest. They're asking Sajid Javid now to urgently investigate what guidance, what training is being given to police officers nationwide to ensure that they protect the freedom to preach in public. And as I said, and we're really strong on this, Sharon and I, through Campaign for Truth, because we deal with Kufi. We are very, very connected to the Christian communities who are supportive of Israel here. We're very strong on this, that obviously none of our leadership organizations have even bothered to express their anger about this, because they are running a No to Hate campaign along with the Jewish News, Board of Deputies, Tell Mama UK, Faith Matters, and a No to Hate campaign, which they obviously say that interfaith is important. Now, this interfaith and this affects us. It affects our freedom of speech. It affects us when we counter the BDS on the streets. It's our freedom of speech which is taken away, and it's a protection to the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel demonstrators. When we express our freedom of speech, our flags are burned, we are abused, we are called having names like the Jews should burn in hell, etc., etc. So it's very, very important for you to share this petition. Whatever your faith, agnostic, atheist, Sikh, Hindu, Christian, Jew, Muslim, you must understand that it affects us. So on to Sharon. I think you've
Okay.
posted, yeah.
So I've posted the the petition there for you. It says Freedom for Street Preaching. Please go there, link onto it, and sign it, and share it on your pages, share it on Twitter, share it to your friends. If people are not on social media, perhaps you can contact Christian Concern and verbally tell them, give them your details so they can add you to the petition. It's really important that that our government understands what is happening here. Ambrosine touched a little bit on why it is important for interfaith work to include Christianity. What we find, unfortunately, certainly in the Jewish interfaith work, is that their main interfaith work is to do with Islam, to do with Muslims. They have recently, mostly since Campaign for Truth and Eye and Antisemitism branched into, or didn't branch, gave them an idea that we do interfaith work with Sikhs, with Hindus, and with all sorts of other people. They've recently sort of made a few inroads into the Sikh community, but they certainly have said absolutely nothing. There's been no statement, excuse me, about this preacher, not a single statement. And if you look certainly at the Board of Deputies Facebook page or their website, you will see that they make statements about everything. They even had a vigil for the Jewish man that was beaten up in Holloway. They held a vigil with the local councillor, with Rabbi Gluck, with a whole crowd of people headed up by the very erudite Laura Marks, who knows all about language and words. Unfortunately, they never made a statement when I got beaten up. And I can tell you that I still suffer from that. They made no statement, even though they were asked to do so at a board meeting by several deputies, even though they received a letter signed by over 100 people to make a statement about the mugging that I suffered, and they didn't. So this interfaith work plays a big role in the Judeo-Christian ethic of our Western governance, of Western democracy. And if democracy is going to be routed out by police who arrest a man on hearsay, not on evidence, not on anything that they could actually arrest him for, somebody simply called up the police and said, this man is being racist, and they arrived with their handcuffs and they took him off the street, requisitioning or taking away his Bible. Now, to a preacher, the Bible is the most important thing. And I hate to think what would happen if they went to one of those Islamic preachers on the streets and took their Quran away, whether they would have the guts to do it. I somehow doubt it. Ambrosine, do you have the video of Brexit, the Leave campaign, the EU Leave campaign, where they lined up two videos side by side of two preachers and how the police reacted to the preachers? Have you got that video?
I haven't got it on me yet quickly,
Okay.
but
I'm going to look at it.
yeah.
I'm going to post it here. So you take over while I look for that video.
Okay.
I'm going to try and find it.
So yeah, so I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the viral impact of this video, because we know that on Speaker's Corner now for 2 years nearly, Speaker's Corner has been occupied by violence, intimidation. It is not a place at the moment for any freedom of speech, and it's been occupied and usually hostile against Christians who wish to talk about their faith. There is lots of debating around, but it's something very unusual for this now form of abuse and harassment to preachers, to Christian preachers. They are being, this particular situation is the reason that I filmed it, was that the man was going to be, what I believe to be assaulted. The guy came up to him head to head like this, and this is why I stopped my car and got out my car and started filming this particular preacher. And to see the situation, listening to the man, the Muslim man, come up to this guy and not understanding or not wanting to hear that this is nothing to do with his religion. This is a man preaching and prophesying Christianity. And for then the Muslim man to turn around and say, your Quran is shit. And this is exactly what he said. And to receive a comeback, it got him more angry and more virulent. And I had to intervene and say all sorts of things to make sure that the man wasn't assaulted. And it's a real travesty of justice when a policeman will turn around and say, you've been reported, or it's because it's Islamophobia, when it wasn't, when it was an assault. It was intimidation of a man proselytizing his Bible. Have you got the video yet?
No, I'm just about to post it. Carry on. I'm nearly done.
Yeah.
I'm just looking.
So the main aspect of all of this, and why it's so important to us as Jews, to us as Israeli advocacy, why it's so integral as part of our work, is that freedom of speech is that something that is basically being curtailed. It's being curtailed for Christian Judeo values. It's being curtailed, as you see on Facebook over the past few weeks, where accounts have gone down all of a sudden, altogether. When I started on Twitter, 14 accounts of mine, 14 times, my Eye on Antisemitism account was eradicated with 125,000 followers. And this was, quite a few years ago. And again, on Facebook, I am suspended every 2 months for 30 days, no doubt, always timely, that time. So, this petition goes across nationality, goes across religion, goes across to anyone who believes that they're allowed to stand freely, without intimidation, without violence, and without arrest. The Public Order Act, which was threatened by police to this man, is something that is used a lot in counter demonstrations. So it's extremely important to be aware that this hopefully this letter will make Sajid Javid do something about the training of street preaching and how the police should act when they're coming up to these preachers. And hopefully it will also do something about us, Sharon, because how many times have we been attacked?
This is what I wanted to come to, because we've spoken about the street preacher now, but we have a similar situation with Jews. We have a number of cases over the years where the police have refused to act. We have the evidence of it. We've got videos of it, where the police have refused to act, not least the mugging that we both experienced outside Holloway, outside the pro-Corbyn meeting, where the police now, because we've insisted, have reopened the case, but 6 months later, one doesn't hold out any hope that they're actually going to find anybody. But if we go back a few weeks before that, in the summer of last year, I was attacked outside another Corbyn meeting where somebody virtually strangled me in order to take a book out of my hand that he had given me, which itself was a piece of incriminating evidence of anti-Semitism. It was a booklet on Zionism, and on the cover was a picture of a swastika overlaid with a Magen David. So that was another case. And then early in the summer, there was a JW3 incident where they arrived and demonstrated outside JW3, knocked an activist to the floor, stole her flag, jumped up and down on the flag. And again, the police allowed the culprit to be escorted off the scene. And we can go through the summer before that in 2017. I was attacked outside the Palexpo event where we were protesting the bringing of hate preachers into the Queen Elizabeth Hall, ostensibly to talk on pro-Palestinian issues. but using it as a guise to peddle their Jew hatred. And Ambrosine, this brings me to where we were last Tuesday night. Ambrosine and I attended ostensibly a book launch that was meant to be held in East Finchley in the second-hand bookshop, that was then transferred to the Persian Society up in Finchley, near Tally-Ho. And we went along there, and there was Ambrosine, myself, and a couple of other, there were 4 of us, in a room full of, there weren't people we recognized. There seemed to be a new bunch of pro-Palestinian anti-Semitic activists. And the book launch was a Ghada Karmi book, her new book entitled From Jerusalem to Golders Green. Now, many of you might...
And just to interrupt,
yeah,
you said that it was supposed to be done by the bookstore in East Finchley, but
yes.
Barnet Momentum were the people
that ran it. It turned out to be a Labour Party. The chap organising it was a very nice guy. He told us he was from Labour. And then when we saw the video posted online, it was posted by Barnet Momentum. And now Ghada Karmi's, some of you may know her, she's a very interesting character. She claims to have been born in Jerusalem. And she's a very ardent activist with Jenny Tong, with O'Keefe, with all of these virulent anti-Semitic people, many of whom were on the Mavi Marmara incident a few years ago that you may recall. Now, she started off talking about her book. The first thing she told us was that her car was stolen. So there were no books to be signed, which to us was a little bit of divine justice, but she found that quite sad. And then she continued to tell us about how she came to Golders Green and how she was rather disturbed by that fact, where she asked her father that they had run away from the Jews in Palestine. She kept referring to Israel as Palestine, by the way. Even Sderot she called Palestine. And so she said that she was disturbed that her father had brought her to Golders Green, firstly in the UK, where she said she criticized the British for the Balfour Declaration. So she was sort of against them coming here to Britain because of the Balfour Declaration. And then she said that her father told her that the Jews in Palestine were of a different type. And she uses the word Jew. She doesn't use the word Israeli or Zionist at this stage. She says they're a different type, whereas the Jew in Golders Green are our friends. Now, if we know the kind of friends that Ghada Karmi keeps in the Jewish community, they're the kind of friends that Jeremy Corbyn took his beetroot to on the wrong night for Pesach last year, for Passover. So these kind of Jews she mixed with. So this is what she spoke about, the wrong type of Jew in Israel. That struck me as something. And then she said that when they were leaving Jerusalem, they were getting into a taxi. She said there was firing in the streets, and they were getting in a taxi, and that they were being forced out at gunpoint. And she describes how the dog and Fatima were locked up in the house. And as the taxi pulled off, she was the only one who could turn back and see the dog had got out of the house and was sitting in the road. The dog, interestingly, was called Rex in Palestine. And she said that she and the dog knew they would never come back, even though her parents had said they were only going for 10 days. Now, to those of us who know our history, we know the significance of the 10 days, because we know that when the 5 Arab armies attacked the newly formed Israeli Israel in 1948, they told the Arabs who lived in the area that if they left, they would only be away for 10 days while the 5 Arab armies destroyed the Jews, and then they could come back and there would be peace and the whole country would be run by the Arabs. We know that. So when it came to question time, that was my question to her. What was the 10 days that she was referring to? And she then, in a very convoluted way, admitted that they weren't, after all, forced out under gunpoint, that they were being evacuated by her parents. Her father had driven them to Syria, to her grandparents. This is where her grandparents lived. And the father came back. He came straight back to Jerusalem to work. So the gunpoint and the fighting in the streets suddenly disappeared, and everything seemed okay. So Ambrosine is going to tell you about Gada Karmi and the Syrian grandparents.
Yeah, something very interesting. So we had a few people at the event, and obviously we didn't know it was a Barnet Momentum or Labour Momentum event at the time, which all sort of fitted together when we left. But here's something really interesting. I've seen Gada Karmi a few months ago in the summer when she was speaking with Joseph Olmert, not Joseph Olmert, the ex-Prime Minister Olmert. And she constantly talked about her Palestinian heritage. She was born in Palestine, her parents were Palestinian, and she's been in Palestine for generations and generations and generations and generations. This is how she was speaking. But she mentioned something quite interesting, is that she mentioned that her grandparents were Syrian. It was her grandparents, wasn't it, Sharon?
Yes, her grandparents and her great-grandparents, yeah.
Yeah. So I asked a question to her. I said to her, could you tell me a little bit about your family history? You mentioned that your grandparents and your great-grandparents are Syrian. And then she sort of, like, you'll see it because there is a live video. I'll put the live feed of the whole video of this talk in Finchley. She actually said, well, you should have read my book. That's what she said, basically.
She said, if you had my book, you would read about it there. But she said more than that. What she said was that, yes, they were living in Syria, but in fact, they came from Safed in Palestine.
Safed, that's right.
Safed in Palestine. And when I said Palestine, she kind of smirked a little bit. So this is Gada Karmi. But the reason that I wanted to bring this up is to explain to you the plausibility that people like Gada Karmi have when they tell their story. She speaks very quietly. She speaks with authority. She's clearly got an education. She's a doctor. So she's clearly very verbal. She has a good command of the English language. And when she speaks very quietly and convincingly, to the extent that my cousin who was with us actually found her quite a plausible woman. But there were so many gaps. One of the questions that somebody else asked her was about the Mizrahi Jews that had to flee from Iraq. And she said, this is where she brought the Zionists in. She said that the Zionists actually had come to Iraq to convince the Jews that they had to go and live in the newly formed independent state because they needed to fill it with Jews. And so they create all sorts of ruses to get the Jews out of Iraq. She which is a real porky, actually, because we have videos and we know the history. We know about the Farhud. We know how the Jews were treated in Iraq. But also we have a specific video on how to save Palestine, it's called. And it's produced by the Al-Shirazi clan, who have bought the Hippodrome in Golders Green. And it explains to you how the Iraqi government had perhaps mistakenly kicked the Jews out and stolen all their possessions. This is what he explains, because he said that over 50,000 Jews were sent into Israel to help build the state of Israel. And he said this was perhaps a fault of a secular government in Iraq. And he explains why it's important, therefore, to have a religious government, a Sharia government in Iraq. So these kinds of things are not going to happen again. So this is why I brought you Gada Karmi. And I think Ambrosine and I wanted you to know that this is the kind of stuff that the BDS, that the PSC, which incidentally is still got Jeremy Corbyn as the patron, that this is the kind of stuff that they're peddling, and it's filtering into our universities and into our schools. This is
Sharon,
the history.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Every other word was about the Jews. I mentioned the separation of the Jews.
Yes.
She defined Jews in categories. This was the most shocking thing.
That's
I put
right.
the link to the video down below. she was saying that, you know,
Good.
the Jews, yes, some Jews are good, and I went to Golders Green, and my best friend was a Jew, and she went to Henrietta Barnet because the story of this book, it's basically a book that she wrote in the early 2000s. It's been reprinted probably, and she's talking about her life from Jerusalem to Golders Green, and how, you know, when she grew up, she you know, the Jews were this and the Jews were the Zionists, and she came to Golders Green, and then they were all European white Jews, and you know, it's this
Yeah, she spoke about white
obsession.
Jews, didn't she?
White Jews,
Yeah,
yeah,
white Jews. So the thing that struck me was that her expression, and she pointed her finger like this, and she said they were a different type of Jew.
different type of Jew.
Different type of Jew in Israel and she didn't mention the word Israel, she spoke about Palestine. And she also touched on what is happening quite a lot now, and this is the idea of British colonialism, of the whites, you know, what David Lammy was talking about, what was it, yesterday, about the whites going along to Africa. Well, she was
Yeah,
differentiating here between the different types of Jews, and she was talking about British colonialism and their role in the Middle East. So she was feeding that whole notion of the British firstly being the perpetrators of evil, and the Jews having categories of Jews, which we know that there are, because some Jews are allowed into Labour Party meetings and some Jews are on a list and are not allowed into Labour
yeah,
Party
we're the Jews
meetings.
that are not allowed on the list. Yeah. Mm.
So this brings us to other
Um,
left, Ambazine. Brings us to other left,
yeah,
and which is the
I wanted,
title of our talk.
yeah,
Yeah, a
I
title of our
wanted,
talk, which let me just give the title of the talk, which we
go on then.
called Cigars, Champagne, Nukes, and the Left. And I guess you can get a little hint about that. Ambrosine's going to fill you in because this is her sphere. She's going to fill you in a little bit about the cigars, the champagne, the nukes, and the left.
Yeah. I wrote something today, which actually there's a great cartoon that Benjamin Netanyahu has released, which I think sums this up, which I wrote earlier. But I want to talk about the elections in Israel, and it's basically it really connects with what is happening here, and the hounding of the left towards Netanyahu. So I wrote something a little bit earlier um, about Benjamin Netanyahu being one of the, and I know there are probably people watching who don't really understand about Israeli elections, what's going on, the different political parties, what's been happening to Netanyahu over the past 15 years. But I put here that Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the best prime ministers that Israel has ever had. He never gets any credit from the media, both here, abroad, Europe, but specifically in Israel, and also from the Israelis themselves. But he's accomplished more in making Israel one of the most economic powerhouses of technology, of economics, of high tech, etc. Um, and there are questions that the left-wing media are not discussing regarding the indictments of proposing the indictments to Netanyahu, and there's things they're not telling you how many years, how many decades of time that the legal establishment have been investigating him. You know, people think that they've only just started investigating Netanyahu over the past few years. It's been over decades. It's about 15 years, I think. And they're not telling you how many work hours, you know, with the police investigations and the attorney generals, and the hundreds of thousands of hours of work, of hours dedicated from the left to bring Bibi down, to bring Likud down. And who's paying for all this? Who pays at the end of the day to investigate Netanyahu, and they found nothing. Well, the Israeli taxpayer is paying. And how much money has been dedicated to investigate Netanyahu all these years? Can you imagine all these years, 10 plus, how many work hours, how much money the Israeli taxpayer, the liberal left political taxpayer needs to pay for all of this? So there's not just sort of 1,000 cases, there's not 2,000 cases, of 4,000. And even before these cases, there was investigations, and we've got in the title, of how much food, the expenses of the food, and the cigars and the champagne, and they're investigating, you know, Sarah Netanyahu's holiday trips.
Okay, I think
her hair. Yeah. Yeah, go on. You interrupted.
I think one of the things that perhaps Israeli society doesn't understand, that in the past, Israel was governed in a sense of urgency because they were creating a new state, and they had to build up all sorts of institutions there and governance rules and regulations and law, etc., etc. They had to drain the swamps, literally, not figuratively. They had to get rid of malaria. They were the mandated territory of Palestine was mostly derelict. You can read Mark Twain and all sorts of people who traveled there. George III has a great big collection of photographs, and you'll find that it wasn't the populated country that Gada Karmi would have us believe. It was a swampland, and people went there. They were called chalutzim. They were pioneers. They went there, and which is why the left actually had a love affair with Israel, both here and in Israel, because Israel was created on the idea of the kibbutz movement. It was socialism in action, where everybody, whoever they were, rolled up their sleeves and they did whatever job was necessary in order to create this land. And if you remember, before Begin and before the Likud, the Herut Likud came into power, Israel was habitually governed by left-wing politics, which suited it for that time, with the idea of the kibbutzim and the moshavim. But you also remember that inflation was like 30-40%. People lived in poverty. I remember growing up, and every house had a box in their living room. However rich or poor you were collecting money to send to Israel because Israel couldn't survive. And this is where the idea of America giving Israel aid, the aid, of course, being not money, but aid that an allocation of money that had to be spent in America. So Israel had to buy American goods in order to build up the country. So this is how Israel was governed. But we now have an Israel that is a first world country. I mean, after all, Israel is only the fourth country to have launched a satellite up to the moon. We're talking about an incredibly well-developed first world country, top rate in medicine, top rate in technology, top rate in agriculture, top rate in theater, in design, in the film industry, in almost every sphere of life. Israel has a role to play. Israel Aid goes around the world whenever there's a catastrophe. They're the first people with a plane load of stuff to go there. Even now in the Syrian war, where which are their enemies, they've got a big field hospital up there, and they're treating the Syrian people there for their war wounds and so on. So this is the Israel of today. We have a prime minister, as Ambrosine said, over 15 years has built this country into an economic and a political powerhouse. He is recognized across the world as a statesman. Whether the left like it or not, whether the Meretz and the left parties and the Histadrut like it or not,
and the blue and
Bibi,
white,
the blue and white, all of them, Bibi has created a country that is viability, standing side by side with America, Russia, India, possibly China. And if you look at a world today, there are three people who know where the danger comes from, which brings us to, of our cigars, Champaign, brings us to the nukes. Bibi understands the danger of the nukes, that the Iran deal agreed Iran could have after 10 years. And we're now, what, 4 years into that Iran deal. So we're not far off the 10 years when they will be free to use the nukes that they're still developing, because really they're not winding down this nuclear facility. So, and Bibi knows about it. How does he know about it? He was schooled by the expert in Iran, the man called Bernard Lewis. And Bernard Lewis said one thing. He said mutually assured destruction doesn't work with Iran. The balance of power in the Cold War was kept because Russia and America knew the dangers of a nuclear war. And it was understood that nukes would never be used. They kept that balance of power where they had equal amounts of nuclear facilities, and kept the balance of power. Iran doesn't follow that. Iran is governed by an idea of the 12th Imam coming along and implementing Sharia law across the world. And they do not, I don't think they appreciate that if they had to drop a nuke on Israel, that it would actually destroy them as well. And this is what we need to, it seems to me that the left in Israel find it more important that international statesmen and business people have given the Prime Minister of Israel a cachet of champagne and cigars, and they find that more abhorrent than the idea of a nuke falling on Israel. This is the issue that is faced, and I'm hoping, I know that we're a very small voice, but I'm hoping that somebody is going to hear what we're saying and tell the Israeli electorate, particularly the youngsters, who don't understand that their lives in Israel are prosperous, that they have a fantastic life. If you go there and see how the youngsters live, and I'm talking across the board, not only Jews, I'm talking the Christians there, the Arabs there, the Drusim, all of them live the most fantastic life. You can ask Jonathan El-Khoury, who was here, who spoke for us. He's a Christian Arab from Lebanon who came to live in Israel with his family. You can ask him, and Muhammad, I can't recall Muhammad's surname. Muhammad is a Druze. You can ask them the fantastic life that they lead there. And the youngsters don't understand this. They think it's time for change. They go on this hope and prayer idea that maybe something better will come out of it. How much better can they live? If you look at the prosperity, the amount of Israelis that travel the world, that go skiing in Europe, that travel the Far East, that spend a year out, as do normal kids in America and Britain, a year out between university and the army, et cetera, et cetera. They live a fantastic life. And if they want to keep that life, there is only one party to vote for, and that's Likud, because Likud has it all. Likud takes care of LGBT. Likud takes care of Arabs. They've got Arab candidates. They've got LGBT candidates. They've got right-wing candidates. The only thing Likud doesn't have are the left. Otherwise, they actually are the party for every man. They're the party across the board. So there you go.
You're quite. It's quite interesting to see friends of mine who are Israelis living here, who have left Israel to live here, talking about how Bibi is this and Bibi is that, and another party, and supporting the Labour Party, living here, knowing how the people of the UK feel about Theresa May, saying exactly the same things, and wanting to vote for a Labour government, essentially, to ruin the prosperity, to stop the prosperity, the lowest unemployment that we have, the highest economic record that we have, to where, platformed across the world. And it's interesting here to hear Israelis coming to live in the UK. And when I ask them, go back to Israel, they won't, but they'll come here and they'll support a left-wing government. It's very, very weird. And it is, I have to say, because having Israeli family and knowing what they're saying, there's a lot of jealousy that happens in Israel, Israelis, a lot of this jealousy that Sarah Netanyahu recently, when Netanyahu just went to Russia, to meet Putin. And there was a question that Yair Netanyahu reshared. And the question was, why did Sarah accompany Netanyahu on a trip to Russia? What did she think she's doing? And it's like this ignorance, this absolute ignorance of the way that politicians and prime ministers and presidents all over the world are.
There's still this idea that Israel has to live to a different standard to the rest of the world, and this is not true. What we have in Israel as well is the prime minister's home in Jerusalem is also the home in which he entertains dignitaries from abroad. And I don't know if Israelis want to be known for being schnorrers, where a dignitary would come along and they
want to explain the word schnorrers
a schnorrer.
To some people who don't know.
They want the prime minister of Israel to come along in his sandals and his little shorts and his flat cap to greet President Trump or Putin or whoever comes to visit him, and not offer him a glass of champagne with his dinner.
Without
this is what they would like. Perhaps give him without a wife. They leave the wife out. The wife, in political terms, plays a very big role. In America, we know that the president's wife plays a huge role in charity work, travels with the president on state occasions. Some presidents' wives more than others. Mike Pence, the vice president, doesn't even go next door without his wife. His wife travels everywhere with him. And for me, a leader who cares to take his wife on journeys like this is saying to the world, our culture is based in the family. The family work together for the strength of the family and therefore the strength of the country. And for me, this is a very important issue. And I think the left have to get to terms with this. They can't keep on with their nasties and create stories that don't exist in order to try and get their way. If they've got a policy that works, let them put their policy to the electorate and say, we can improve your lives. I don't believe socialism in 2019 is going to improve anybody's lives, certainly not in the Western world. It's not required. It's redundant. It needs to have a rethink about what it's got to offer an electorate. That's my personal political view, that socialism is a dead ideology.
We can see that in Venezuela.
But this is why the left is falling apart, because it actually has nothing to offer. It comes into power. It doesn't have a job before it becomes a politician. It has an ideology that is archaic. If you listen to what Jeremy Corbyn has to offer in terms of Marxism to UK 2019, it's almost laughable, and it would be if it wasn't as serious. So, where do we go from there, Ambrosine?
Well, interesting. I wanted to add about hair before we go on about our events this week that we're holding, so we can invite people to the events if they want to. But I wanted to talk about women's hair just quickly.
Women's hair?
Yeah, women's hair. Looking at Israel.
I can bring you my bunch of hair if you want.
No, looking at the Israelis arguing on Twitter, women especially, about how much does Sarah Netanyahu spend? Why does she need a personal hairdresser? Why does she need a makeup artist? I don't know about you, but I get my hair done often. Like, I'm talking possibly about maybe once every 2 weeks, even earlier. And if I had the chance and the time, I'd probably get it done every day, like my mother did in the 50s, where she used to go to the hairdresser in Baker Street and have her hair done every day. Why is this amazing jealousy and this envy, this green-eyed monster that comes from women to other women about leaders' wives, presidents and prime ministers' wives, about looking at their clothes if they haven't been recycled, if they haven't worn them 3 or 4 times. I mean, it's just hilarious. But as I said, Sharon, I do believe that Netanyahu Likud will win the election. I have £100 on it. No, I did.
You have £100 on it. You didn't tell me. I'm just trying to find the link to the next event that we've got. And I can't. Can you put it up? The Industry of Lies.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a little.
And I'll put it up.
a little bit about the industry of lies. Okay, so we have on Tuesday night, we've got Ben-Dror Yemeni, the journalist from Israel, together with Amit Deri from, what is he called? Reservists on Duty, who are coming to speak. Ben-Dror has written a book called The Industries of Lies, and it reveals one of the greatest frauds of recent decades, a fraud of historic, even epic proportions, when almost half of all Europeans believe that Israel treats the Palestinians just like the Nazis treated the Jews, when leading politicians assert that the Arab-Israeli conflict is a central cause of violence in the world, and when prominent intellectuals argue that Israel is an apartheid state, the unfortunate reality is that lies prevail. Ben-Dror Yemeni presents an in-depth analysis of many inaccurate and malicious accusations against Israel. He shows that fallacious claims empower radicals and Islamists and perpetuate the conflict and the suffering. The industry of lies is not just fundamentally wrong, but also politically unwise. Palestinians, maybe even more than Israel, are victims of the industry of lies. The book presents a timely, thought-provoking thesis on one of the most disputed topics in the world, the Israeli-Arab conflict, and invites us to rethink the causes of the conflict and the political consequences brought about by the industry of lies. And we have some reviews. If you look on the event, you'll see the reviews of the book. And you will see from what Ben-Dror is going to, and Amit are going to come and talk to us about on Tuesday night, links very much into what Ghada Karmi was doing, spreading these lies, that she is an intrinsic cog in the wheel of this industry of lies, that she could concoct a story. One of the other stories that we didn't tell you about was she left the dog and Fatima, and she didn't tell us who Fatima was. I knew as a South African that Fatima was the maid, but she had told the audience that Israel was an apartheid state, and therefore how could she, a so-called Palestinian, come from a state that is an apartheid state even before the Jews had set up their new government in 1948. They had a maid. She described her maid as though this was my maid Mabel, who brought me up, who did my homework with me, who cooked for my parents, who cleaned our house, who took us for walks and did our homework, and who I regarded as a mother. And this is exactly the words that she used. And yet she would call me a racist because I grew up in South Africa with my maid, and I would call her a racist because she grew up in the same circumstances, or so she would lead us to believe. So this is the problems that we have here with this industry of lies. And I'm hoping that you will come along. I'm just trying to find my page again. Come along to this meeting on Tuesday night. It's going to be spectacular. Ben-Dror is one of the most respected journalists in Israel. So we're hoping to see you there. The other thing that we're having, and for this you need to call either Ambrosine or I, on the 14th of March, we have Dagi Altabef coming to give us an update at a salon event. It's going to be a very small salon event. By invitation only, because it's going to be at my house. So Dagi is going to bring to us the latest in what's going on in Israel, an update on the election, the whole Bibi crisis, etc., etc. You may remember that Dagi Altabef came here to speak for us 2 years ago. He's part of an organization called IMTI. And you may recall, David Collier certainly will recall, because he wrote the blogs about it, where our synagogue had disinvited us once they heard that Dougie was coming to speak for us.
That was a story. Can I just recall that story a little bit?
Yes, you can post some of the stuff. I'm off the page now for some reason.
Yeah, no, I wanted to tell people about that our wonderful political left in the Jewish community tried to stop our event of Im Tertzu coming across we had it booked for Hampstead Garden Suburb Shul Synagogue, and all of a sudden it was cancelled, and there was press in Jewish Chronicle about that. This was only 2 years ago, and we found out that people like Yachad UK were behind the cancellation, and people within the Jewish left of our leadership, which is shocking because
New
now,
Israel Fund,
yeah, the New Israel Fund, etc. So, but Douglas is a wonderful guy, and he's very entertaining. And
But as I said, if you want to come to that, you're going to need to call us or send us a message, a private message, and we have to monitor the number of people who are coming very closely. And as usual, there will be a lot of Jewish fuel on the table.
what's Jewish fuel, Sharon?
Salmon, cheese, and Richard Millet's going to bring the cake.
Yeah, well, he said he's going to Leeds. He's run away to Leeds for a while for a rest.
He's gone to Leeds. That's a strange place to have a rest, Richard.
I don't think he's on here, but
he's not on here.
Okay, so
no.
we've covered everything. So let's just recap. Please sign the petition to Sajid Javid from Christian Concern and us, that we basically will protect Christian preachers on the streets. This is really important for freedom of speech under a Sadiq Khan mayorship. We've noticed that since Sadiq Khan has been running the show, that a horrific amount of crime, stabbings, etc., have happened. We hope that Sean Bailey at least will win the 2020 election for mayor. So if you can sign the petition underneath when the live feed goes down, you'll be able to see the links. The links are also on Eye on Antisemitism and Campaign4Truth, and also I was going to say also
at Christian Concern.
At Christian Concern, which you can find on Facebook as well as Twitter. It's on Twitter at C Concern, that's C for cat, Concern, and our Twitter feeds are at Antisemitism Eye, as in your eye, and Campaign4T, Campaign4Truth.
At Campaign4T.
At Campaign4T on Twitter as well. I think it's over. I just would like to say thank you very much for everyone who made that video viral and took it out there it covered the whole world, Sharon, the whole world.
2.4 million reach on Twitter alone, over 600,000 reach on Campaign4Truth, which is phenomenal.
On Sadiq Khan,
I'm not sure what
it was 1.5 million reach on other pages. Yeah. So we're talking in the millions. Yeah.
We're talking of Facebook, probably 4 or 5 million reach on Facebook if you combine all the pages together. So this is a truly remarkable story.
And Fox News picked it up. So that's great.
Fox News picked it up. It was in the Mail. The mainstream media here in the UK didn't pick it up too much, which is very interesting, because they all were sent links to it. But then they didn't pick up on Israel's satellite either. So we won't talk about the media now. We'll do another chat about the media another time. Now, Norman, thank you so much. The two lionesses of Israel, he calls us. Bravo. Thank you so much. Yep, there we go. So we're going to say goodnight to you.
Oh, do we just want to quickly, just at the end of this, something...
Do you want to sing, Hadikva?
I haven't got my flag. It's downstairs.
Okay.
I will next time I'll play the violin.
Will you? Okay, so what did you want to say?
Violin.
Norman can play the piano.
Yeah, well, maybe I should come round to you and you play the piano and I'll play the violin and you sing, Hatikva.
Me sing Hatikva, it'll go wrong.
I wanted to talk about the distance, just quickly.
Oh, Norman, what did you say?
Do you want to up... It's now going to descend into chaos. Do you want to... thank you, Jan, Suzanne.
Yes.
Bless you.
Thanks.
do you want to just talk about quickly the reopening of the case of the assault and how near it was to Corbyn?
Oh, yes, I'll just update you very quickly about the mugging that took place. You all know, because we spoke about it before, that when I was really kicked in the head completely, Ambrosine was kicked in the shin, so she got off a bit lighter than I did. The police closed the case, despite the fact that we had given them photographs of the culprits, of the attackers. We had given them the names of the organizers. We'd given them all the information they needed. We'd given them videos, etc., etc. They closed the case. And so I wrote to Mike Freer, my MP, as you all know, and he very fantastically wrote to the police commissioner for London, and she appointed a chief detective inspector from the CID. He's the man, he told us, he's in charge of the Quarter of London to investigate, and he came to see us. And the reason he came himself, he said, is because he sensed there was something more here than just simply a mugging. Anyway, he was fantastic, and he's appointed a chief inspector, I think, to look at it. And the chief inspector's been fantastic. He's reopened the case. He's asked for the evidence again. He's joined the two assaults, which the police had sought to divide. Yeah. He's joined Ambrosine's assault and my ABH together in one file so that he can keep abreast of it. He's gone back to the venue, which is the habitual venue for Labour Party meetings. And interestingly, I guess it's used because Jeremy Corbyn lives a few steps away from that place where I was so severely beaten up.
About 20 hops away.
Yeah, if you can still hop, Ambrosine. So this is where we're at with that, and we're hoping that they're going to find these girls for many reasons, not least that we hear so many times when somebody has attacked somebody and they don't find them, that the next time they're found, they've actually killed somebody. What those girls did to me was really severe. And I can tell you that they need to be taken off the streets. They need to be reschooled. They need to be re-educated. Certainly not put in prison because they'll be radicalized in prison. But they should actually have somebody going to their homes and helping them to get out of the mire that they're living in at the moment. So I'm hoping the police will actually get hold of them. So that's where we're at with the mugging. We're preparing our report for the DCI. We're preparing our report. He wants to hear of all the cases that the police have failed to investigate, including, by the way, when we were talking about the preacher, and they took the preacher off the streets, in the summer of 2017, in front of a policeman, a little man from Iran, and I have it on recording, told me that I, as a Jew, together with all the Christians, are going to burn in hellfire. Yes? I have it recorded in front of the policeman. I would have called that disturbing the peace, and I would have called that racist. But this little man was not taken off the streets. And in fact, he's everywhere. When we go to anti-Israel demos, we see this little man around the place. He looks like he's a sort of Iranian version of our preacher, except he's a bit of a bigot. He really is the racist. So all of these cases are going to be put together in a report, which we're compiling. We're going to go off to the DCI, and hopefully he's going to do something about it. So there's your update.
And there's going to be an update with the preacher. There's a little interview with all the story of what happened.
Yeah, follow it.
It's going to
follow it. There's going to be developments over the next few months. It's not ending here.
Oh, no.
It's going to It's going to be coming up a lot.
Yeah.
So do follow it. Yeah.
Hi, Janine. Janine was also.
Hi, Janine.
Janine was the
Janine
one
was
that,
there. Janine was fantastic. She drove me to hospital. She is one of the witnesses, and she was incredible. So hi. Okay, so the lionesses are going to roar and go off.
And Rak Bibi.
Ooh. Vote Bibi.
Rak
Sign
Bibi.
the petition.
Sign the petition. Yeah.
What else?
Let's bring. Let's
come to the meetings
come to
next
the
Tuesday
meetings.
night. It's in North London. The address is on the page, so you can find it. If you're stuck, do contact us. Who's there? Kitty. Hello, Kitty, my darling. Are you going off to bed now? It's lovely to see you. Take care. So we're going to sign off. We're going to say good night.
Good night.
It's Kathy, not Kitty. Sorry, it's Kathy. Okay, so we're going to say good night.
All right.
Sleep tight. Don't let the fleas bite.
No, the bed bugs. It's supposed to be the bed bugs.
The bed bugs, is it? Okay.
And can I just quickly, before I go, can I implore? I run UK Likud, Friends of UK Likud page. Can I implore, if anybody's watching who's doing this campaign for Likud in Israel, in Halikud, can I implore them to, when the videos go up of which go up regularly with Likud TV and the Likud videos, that they could subtitle some in English, because
Yes,
I'm getting
please.
a lot of people messaging me saying, we don't understand what's going on, and I'm trying to give them a brief thing of what's happening, and we need a lot of stuff in English. A lot of stuff is just in Hebrew, and not everyone can speak Hebrew, and not everyone speaks well in Hebrew. So, okay, all right, Sharon, I'll leave it with you.
Night,
Good night,
everybody.
and speak to you all later. See
We'll
you on
speak
Tuesday.
to you next time. See you Tuesday. Please come. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.